this. Are you? No. Okay. Hey guys. This video finds what few of you that still watch well. It's been a little bit, probably a week or so since I've done a video. I'm kind of in cramped quarters. I apologize. I've got my blood pressure medicines and purse and everything sitting right in front of me, and I'm on my bed. It's kind of cold in the front like den or whatever you call it of my house where I used to have my office at, which is still my office, but I don't go in there when it's cold. So I sit on my bed and work, do whatever I have to do. So I hope that everybody's well today. Today I wanted to talk about the book of Job. Obviously, we all know that's a long book, and I can't go over all of it in one sitting. It may take 3 parts. It may take 2. I'm going to go over the first part, probably the first 11, 12 chapters or so. What really started me back on the book of Job, it's been years since I've read through the entire book. My daughter and I have just been kind of going over it again recently because I think as the Lord leads you in wisdom and as you get older, you see things. If you reread the Bible, people think that, oh, well, I've read the Bible once, so I've got it all figured out. I've read some parts of the Bible numerous times. And after reading, years later, I've noticed things that I didn't notice before. So it's always good to go back and to pray and to ask the Holy Spirit to show you things the second time, third time, fourth time around. I just ask, like I always do, that any of y'all that watch my videos, please pray for me and my daughter. Still having a lot of health issues. Saw one of my doctors. I think that in this doctor's mind, I'm basically crazy. I think that a lot of doctors, who deal with people that have prior issues that they would consider mental health issues, which I now know weren't mental health issues. My history and some of the things I'd been through caused me to have a severe nervous breakdown. There was a lot leading up to that, and God has shown me why I had that. And if any of you guys are interested in that, I have touched on that briefly in a video, my testimony about mental health, and where I think a lot of mental health disorders stem from. I think it's lack of God in your life. Some of them I know for a fact are directly related to demons. Like, let's look at the guy at the tombs, for example. He had a legion of demons, and people just thought he was crazy. It's really easy to just dismiss someone and say they're crazy. I'm gonna quote this because this is gonna go right into the psalm that I was reading when God led me to the book of Job. So I was reading Psalm. I think this is 15. Is that a 1 or a 7? I can't even read my own writing. Is that a 1? Or is that
That's a 7.
That's a 7? I didn't think it was Psalm 75, but she may be right. Hold on. I think it's Psalm. I thought it was 15. I don't know why I would have made my 1 like that, but let me look at it. Psalm 15. Yes, it is Psalm 15. It's a 1. It don't look like a 1, does it? My daughter's like, that's a 7. Anywho, that's what I was reading. But I want to start off and preface it with this. Guys, sometimes I know it's hard for some of y'all to believe, but sometimes people who aren't saved can rebuke us. And sometimes people who aren't saved are very wise. God has given them wisdom for one reason or another. And I'm going to quote a person who I know is not saved, who I think his family, he said, were Muslim at the time. His name is Dave Chappelle. I used to watch a lot of really dirty, bad comedy back in the day in my early 20s. And he was a comedian back then. I'm sure probably everybody's heard of him. He was on Comedy Central, I think was the name of the channel. And he had like a regular show. And I saw him on an interview one time. And he said, you know what? One of the worst things that a person can do to someone is to dismiss them and to just say, this person's crazy. Um, it's so easy, he said, just to see someone acting in a way that we're not either familiar with or we don't understand, to not understand someone and call them crazy. And he is 110% correct. Um, I agree with him because he said when you don't understand someone and communication breaks down, it's really easy. It's really easy to call someone crazy. He started to mention that in Hollywood, because he was in Hollywood at that time, he said things go on in this environment that cause people to lose it and to flip out. And he said, why do you think it is we see all these celebrities who are in rehab, all these celebrities who are out? I think one of them was Martin Lawrence, who used to be in those Big Mama or something like that, Mama's House or something. He had like several movies that were connected to that. They found him on a freeway saying people were trying to kill him, and everybody called him crazy. Jamie Foxx, let's look at him. He was a comedian back in the day and then a singer. He's recently went through that, and he said that people were out to get him because he was exposing things in Hollywood. Um, but I just think in general, people today think that if you admit weakness, if you admit that you have some issues going on, whether they be mental, emotional, physical, it doesn't matter, spiritual, which is the most important aspect. People want to say, well, that person's just, they're nuts, they're crazy, they're out of it. But the worst thing is people don't want to admit when they're struggling. And this world has made people believe that weakness is almost like a sin. That weakness is almost a disease, and it's not. There's a church, guys, in the book of Revelation called the Church of Laodicea. And I know a lot of you know who that is. Some of you that may watch my video, though, may not. And Jesus gave a revelation. I'm going to start gearing my channel more toward, I think, the lost, because I am so tired of seeing Christians who claim to be Christians who are mean, who are hateful, who are rude, who don't want to help those in need. And I'm just tired of seeing it, to be honest. I feel like God wants me to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, because I used to be in that situation. And going through some of my health battles, even recently, I see just how thick of a decline the medical field has. I see the decline in just the medical field in general. I see how insurances work. I worked for Medicare for a while, and I know how all that works. And I see that even people who have Medicaid or Medicare are treated different because it is a government sponsored, program. Not so much people with Medicare, because most people that have Medicare, are retiring. They've had a job. They're 65. They've retired. But people with Medicaid, I dealt with that as well at the job I was at. And I see just how people treat people who are in need differently. It's not fair. It's not fair that just because people have money or just because people have status or prestige or whatever it is they have, it is not fair to treat people differently, especially when a person comes to you and says, I'm hurting, I'm struggling, I'm in need. But this world wants people to put their head up, shake it off. I'll say, just shake it off. You're fine. Don't just shrug it off. It's no, you're fine. They don't want you to admit weakness, because to them, weakness is something to snub at. It's something to be like, ugh, like don't ask for help. You're not supposed to. Hence the Church of Laodicea. Jesus gave a revelation to John while he was on the island of Patmos. And the 7 angels wrote 7 letters to the 7 churches. And one of those churches was the Church of Laodicea. And he said, you think you are increased in goods, that you're wealthy, that you have need of nothing, yet you don't know that you're poor, blind, and naked. He said, I counsel thee to buy of me gold that has been refined in the fire, because you're seeking things of this world that will perish, that have nothing to do with me. Jesus was not a man who was out here like some of these, like Kenneth Copeland and all these other televangelists tell you, that he was all happy-go-lucky guy. Isaiah described Jesus as a man who was acquainted with grief and sorrow. Jesus was so stressed out before his crucifixion that the night before, when he was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he had Peter, James, and John with him, he told them to stay watch, and they could not stay awake. But he was in that garden, and he was saying, Father, if there be a way for this cup to be taken from me, please let it be. But if not, let your will be done. And as this was happening, and I listened to a trauma surgeon explain this, that it is a real condition what Jesus suffered. I can't remember the name of it right now off the top of my head, but he was sweating blood from such profuse stress. And that trauma surgeon said that is an actual condition. It is very, very, very rare. But when you get so stressed to the point that you are sweating blood, like your body just shuts down. And he was literally sweating blood. And it makes me so sad to know that people today are so afraid to admit that they're suffering, that they're struggling, because the generation we live in today's society, it is easy to dismiss people and be like, you're fine. You're fine. And as I was reading Psalm 15, it said, who can live in your sacred tent, Lord? Who can live on your holy mountain? This is David writing. It says, those whose walk must be blameless, who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from their heart, whose tongue utters no slander, who does no wrong to a neighbor, who casts no slur on others, and who despises a vile person. That's another thing. People today are people pleasers. I was one for 38 years, and I'm not doing it anymore. If you don't like me, that's fine. But you have to love what God loves, guys, and you have to hate what God hates. Jesus Christ does not expect you to endure a person who is a schemer, who is vile, who is, out to do evil. He doesn't expect you to do that. He wants you to shun evil. I looked up what vile means. It says, actually, I didn't look it up. Sorry, I was going to, but you all know what vile means. But as that psalm goes on, it says a person who keeps an oath or a vow, even when it hurts. Sometimes you'll promise someone something and you can't do it, but you've already promised them. It's already came out your mouth. God's heard it, that person's heard it, and you know it. And you have to keep it, even if it hurts. A person who doesn't change their mind, who's not blown by every wind and wave of doctrine. This is Psalm 15, guys. It's very short, so you can just follow along. I just put like the highlights of that psalm. A person who lends money to the poor without interest. This is something else. I'm going to share this testimony. My ex, I thought he was my husband, but if you all know my original testimony, you'll know that he wasn't. But that's neither here nor there. And guys, I want you to understand something. I do believe that there are people who are saved, who are in adulterous unions that literally don't know, but I believe God's going to bring them to that knowledge. I believe there are people who may not understand yet, who are seeking God, who he will make known. And I don't believe like some of these people who are in this, I call it a cult now. Had I known the people that I would meet who are so cult minded that think that just because they've got out of a remarriage and they're out of that adulterous situation, that they are now heaven bound, yet they're on every other, what am I trying to say? If there was a checklist for sin or a checklist for what not to do, they're on every one. You could check all the way down. They do this, they do this. Like I have met so many people who all they talk about is remarriage, adultery, and they never graduate on to things that God and Paul also talks about are the greatest gifts and the greatest things that you can acquire as a saved person as a believer in Christ. And that's faith, hope, and love. Charity, guys. To be selfless. Love knows no greater one than this, and a man would lay down his life for his friends. So, testimony, lend money to the poor without interest. My ex, his family, they never had anything really to do with us the whole 9, 10 years that we were together. We have a child. It's my daughter. And when she was really young, we had issues, a lot of issues, addiction issues. Um, and of course, we did things we shouldn't. And I know people were probably skeptical to lend money to us. And looking back now, I totally understand why. I probably wouldn't have lent money to me either. But during that time, we had asked his family because like I said, we really didn't have a relationship with them. We would see them maybe every other year, sometimes like at Christmas one time. My daughter doesn't even know them. She met them. I think she met his family maybe twice. You might have met them twice when you were so little you don't remember. She was like so young she doesn't even know them. And we had asked for some money. They lent us, I think it was like $100, but he wanted like his dad wanted like, and the woman he's with, which is not his wife, he wanted like 140 back. So he was like charging interest on it. And that just blew my mind. I was like, well, wow, this is your son and you're going to charge him interest. And we were literally poor. We were basically destitute at that time. Of course, like I said, I wouldn't have trusted me with money then either. And I get why they would have been, mistrusting of me or him. But to charge the poor, you can't do that. God says, don't do that. A person who's blameless, a person who can live and dwell with God, will give money without restraint. If someone asks of you and you have the ability to do it, and I say to my daughter all the time, I wish I had so much money because I just know so many things that I would want to do to help people. There's so many times when I had extra money, when I made a lot of money, more so than I do now. I mean, we would go out to eat and I would just give people $20, $30 tips if I had it because I knew how hard they worked and I wanted to show appreciation for a service they'd provided me, whether it be a waitress or someone who um, had helped me, like came to my house and delivered something, pizza a lot. I would give the pizza guys that came here like a lot of extra money because I wanted to show appreciation and I knew God wanted me to do that. That psalm goes on and says, doesn't accept bribes against the innocent. You would be shocked if you knew in this day and time how many people bribe others, and who prey on innocent people. And that's what this world is. Everybody that's in a powerful position in this world, I promise you, they probably didn't get there on the up and up. Now there are a few people that maybe God has let have extra money, who he has made rich, who he was put in positions, but they are few and far in between. So as I read Psalm 15 and it was talking about being blameless, that's when my mind was brought back to Job. And, I'm not going to go over the first couple of chapters. I think that most people know that, the angels were coming before God and they were presenting themselves. And then Satan shows up and God asked him, where have you been? And he said, I've been roaming to and fro. And he says, well, what have you considered my servant Job? Because let's be real, God already knew what Satan was thinking. He created him. He knew that he was wanting somebody to bother, to test. He said, have you thought of him? He's blameless. He's upright. He in all things. And he said, yeah, but take the hedge around him. And then all these things start happening because the devil says, take the hedge around his family. Then he'll curse you. Take his health and then he'll curse you to your face. So God allows all of his children to pass away. They're in a house. It collapses. The wind blows and it collapses. God gives Satan permission to go after Job. But I'm going to tell you something. God will never do that to you unless he knows for a fact that you won't falter. And Job does not falter. But I am so encouraged by what Job said. And years ago, when I used to see what his three friends wrote, Eliphaz, Bildad, and I think it's Zophar, I was like, well, what they're saying is true. And I was like, why does everybody say that they were such bad friends? I think, and now looking back, now recently, the Lord, the Spirit, showed me why they were wrong. So let's start around chapter 4 when Eliphaz is talking. Right before this, Job was like, I wish the day of my birth had never came. He said, I wish that day had never saw the light of day. I wish that I'd never nursed at my mother's breast. I wish there weren't legs to deliver me. He was just saying he wished that there was nothing, that he had never been there, because it would have been better off for him because of all the anguish that he had suffered, all the loss that he had suffered. His children died. His wife told him to curse God and die. His servants kept coming and saying, your children are dead. Now all the goats are gone. The sheep are gone. Everything's gone. They stole, like the neighboring towns came and raided him and stole all of his livestock. And then God allows Satan to bring up sores on him. And he's festering sores. And it says he was taking broken pottery and scratching himself in the dust. And here comes his friends. And they sit there with him at first for 7 days. I find that, incredible. 7 days they all sat there and they didn't say a word. But after that, Job speaks. And then here comes Eliphaz. He was a Temanite. He starts speaking first. And when I first read that response of what he said, I was like, well, what's so wrong with what he said to Job? It's not that bad. But after I prayed and I read the very first line of Job's words in chapter, I think it was 6, verse 1, I knew. And I'm going to read that. Let's look at Job 6, verse 1. Job said, if only my anguish could be weighed and all of my misery be placed on the scales. And when I read that and I went back and saw what Eliphaz said, I realized, I hope my cat doesn't start meowing, guys. She's going nuts. It's sort of like today when you're struggling, just like what I was talking about, and you're going through something and people just spout out verses happily. And now look, I'm not downing that. It is great when you have Christian people who surround you when something's going on and they say, look, sister, or look, brother, remember that they that wait upon the Lord, that's one that's quoted commonly when people are struggling and they're going through something and they're waiting on God. People will spout out that verse in Isaiah, they that wait upon the Lord. And that's great. I'm not knocking that. But Eliphaz's response to Job here is almost like repetitious. He's talking about the goodness of God. He's talking about the graciousness of God. And guys, that's great. Is that sinful? Is that wrong to give people verses that's going to encourage them? No. But when I read what Eliphaz said, and he was saying things like, your words have been supported, you've been strengthened, but now trouble comes to you. And he says, fear and trembling have made my bones shake. And he's talking about, can a mortal be more righteous than God? Can even a strong man be more pure than his maker? He's saying things that are true, you guys. But it's like I said, I thought of a sermon that Pastor David Wilkerson, I don't know how people feel about him, but I'm going to tell you, there's some sermons that I've listened to that I know the Holy Spirit had that man speak. I know that God used him. But there was a sermon called God Knows. And he was talking about his son, who at the time was having all this pain. He had like a back condition. He had just wanted to go out and minister to young people. That was what he felt like he was being called to do, Pastor Dave's son. And he started going through this trial with his back pain. And he saw all kinds of doctors and nobody could help him. And he was in constant pain. And he met this little lady at the doctor's office that day where he was at one of his doctors, Pastor Dave's son. And she had been talking to him and said, I had broke my wrist. And she said, I hate to ask you this, but someone started my car to get me here. Do you think you could come downstairs and start my car so that I could leave? Because this little lady had no one to help her. And she was in such great pain, he said. So Pastor Dave's son walks her downstairs. He starts her car. He helps her in and stuff. And said she turned and looked at him and she said, You have no idea what this means to me. And his son said, I know. And Pastor Dave said, it's little things like that that can encourage and that can strengthen a person. Little things. What if at that moment he had said, well, they that wait on the Lord, will renew their strength, and smiled and not help that lady? A Bible verse there wasn't necessarily useful. Now, can you witness after you've helped her? Sure. But what Pastor Dave was saying is that when you're really going through a trial and you're suffering and you're struggling and you're in pain or you're in emotional distress or whatever it is, he said, I don't want to talk to some young whippersnapper who's never been through anything and is going to quote Bible verses at me. He said, is that great? Yes, guys, I'm not knocking that. That's great. He said, but I want somebody who's been through the fire, somebody who's been through trials, who knows what it's like and can just sit with me and encourage me in that way. Maybe you could, like you said, turn on that little lady's car like his son did that day. But that's what I see through Eliphaz, is he was just talking about, positive things. There were good things that he said about God in his response to Job, but it wasn't necessarily helpful. I'm going to read on from my notes here. After Job starts to speak in chapter 6, like I just read, he said, if my anguish could be weighed, if my misery could be weighed upon a scale. And when I read that, I heard the Spirit say, this is proof that, look, God doesn't charge you with sin for speaking the truth. Job was speaking from the truth of his agony and his misery. And like I said at the beginning of the video, guys, in Isaiah, it says that Jesus was a man acquainted with grief, had many sorrows. It didn't say Jesus was a jovial guy who was kicked back, relaxed, and was, all good with everybody. That's not who Jesus was. He said he didn't come to bring peace, but a sword, to separate a mother from a daughter, a father from a son. Job spoke the truth. And he said, the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit is drinking in that poison. God's terrors are all around me. He said, can we not also, if we accept good from God, should we also not accept bad? And see, nobody wants to realize that in today's society, it is commonly accepted that if you're going through something, you're weak. And weakness is, nope, no Christian should be suffering. You don't know how many people I've encountered over the years that when I would go through something, they would say, well, you're not a Christian because you have the devil in you, because you wouldn't be sick. Guys, that is not true. God will put you through trials and tests. He will allow you to go through things. Sometimes you make the decision. I know a lot of my consequences of things I've been through were things that I did. I can't blame that on God. I can't charge him with fatherly negligence to say that I made a bad choice and it's God's fault. People want to blame God. Job didn't no such thing. He said, not only have I accepted good from God, but I have to accept the bad too, because God will allow us to go through really hard things sometimes to teach us either a lesson, to keep us down, like Paul when he went through those pains he had. It said it was a messenger of Satan sent to buffet him. He asked God to take it. God said, no, Paul. Paul said he realized later it was because of his pride. It had to keep him down. God was keeping him from becoming too conceited. And you would be shocked lately, even when I first started this channel and when I was telling my testimony of the remarriage adultery, I had thousands of people watching my video. That video has like 7,000 or 8,000 views. And then the other ones have 40. Because when you start speaking the truth and you start telling people what you're going through, they want no part of it. They're like, that person's not a Christian. She's not a Christian. She wouldn't have problems if she was a Christian. Is that not how people look at people today? This is what they were doing to Job. They were trying to find some flaw in Job that he did it. Now, this was a circumstance where he did not. Job did no such thing. This was a test. He was showing Satan that Job wouldn't falter. Excuse me. When Job was saying he wished that his day of birth had never happened, he wanted it to be wiped off the map. And then if you say to people, they were saying, well, Job, you shouldn't talk like that. Yet God charged Job with no such sin. It wasn't sin what he spoke. And it reminded me of Jesus. It said he was touched with the feeling of our infirmity. How many times have y'all heard that quoted? Jesus was touched with the feelings of our infirmities. What does infirmity mean? Do you guys know what an actual textbook definition is? Infirmity technically means a physical or a mental weakness. Weakness. And people today think weakness is a sin. It's a disease. You should puff your chest up and be proud and strong. No. God does not like people like that. He doesn't like the church of Laodicea who say they're increased with goods and they need of nothing. And when I started to tell people my woes, and I don't know what made me think that there was some worldly people around me that I told, things I was going through and even shared on here. And I noticed how my views went down and how people didn't want to have anything to do with me once they realized I was struggling. People don't want no part of that. They want you to be rich, increased in goods, wealthy, right-minded, so to speak. But that is not what God expects. What does God expect? He expects the truth. And Job didn't mask his feelings. Job spoke truth and truth only, and God respected him for that. There's also a scripture in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 and 10, where Paul says, when I am weak, he is strong. So what is the key to weakness? Jesus. Because he doesn't want you to increase your pride and your strength. He wants you to decrease so he can increase. Guys, if you want to run the show, if you want to be in the driver's seat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're not ready to relinquish any control in your life to God, to Jesus Christ, who is your Lord and Savior, then you might as well just chill for a minute, because he's not going to argue and fight you out of the driver's seat. Every person that I think I've ever met in church, even in the years that I first started to become aware of the Lord, when I first was saved in 2010, people were so proud. I just noticed that people in the church were always wanting to talk about accolades, accomplishments. And I started to see in the book of Job, that all these friends, his so-called friends, to me seemed like they were friends because of his prosperity. Because if you hear what Bildad comes in and says, you're going to be shocked. And I'm going to tell a testimony that happened to me once. I'll actually tell it right now. So Bildad, he was kind of like, just get through this. You're going to get through it, all this positivity, prosperity. He said, then God will make you prosper again. You could tell that all he was concerned about was what Job had lost materially. When I was saved in 2010, I was coming off of medication. I had become addicted to prescription meds at that time. And I was doing like a cold turkey withdrawal. And I know maybe some of you all will know what that is. I just got up on a Sunday one morning. I didn't know where I was going. I drove like an hour and a half from my house and just come upon this church I'd never seen before, never had been to. I walked in and there was this little lady there. I know God led me to her, and I hate that I lost contact with her, and that was all my fault when I backslid. But anyway, I came into this church. She said, "Is your name Tara?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "I heard the Spirit tell me a little lady named Tara would be coming in." Just so happened her daughter's name was Tara. We had the same birthday. No, let's see. My birthday was March 7th, and hers was March 8th. And she started sharing stories about her daughter. And she said, "I heard the Spirit tell me you were coming." And I sat with this lady through the service, and it was so powerful. The pastor got up and was telling about one of his sons who had cancer. And I mean, they were so honest. And I was just like, wow. It was going great. You could feel the Spirit of the Lord trying to move, but it was so quickly squashed. When after the service, I met the pastor. He was a very kind man. They were welcoming to me, but then here came his wife. And she immediately started to question me. She said, "Are you a Baptist?" This was a Baptist church. I said, "No, ma'am." I said, I don't really get into denominations. I just love the Lord. I said, "I'm learning." She said, "Well, how do you," because we started talking, and she said, "You have a lot of information about God. How do you know this?" She was questioning how. She said, "Have you been baptized formally?" And guess what, guys? I hadn't. But I'm going to tell you a story. Right before this, everybody around me was saying, "You got to be baptized. You got to be baptized. You got to be baptized." And I said, "Okay," but I hadn't found a church home. And everybody then wanted you to sign a little paper and say you had a church home, which is nonsense. Anyway, I'm not knocking baptism. I think it's great. If you want to do that, that's great. Am I saying you have to be saved? No, I don't believe you do. If God leads you to, you should do it. If you're able, yes, I think it's great. But at that time, I hadn't been baptized yet. I have since, but I hadn't then. And so everybody was putting so much pressure on me. I told her the truth. I said, "Well, a few weeks ago, I was alone in my bathroom at home. And I said, Lord, you know, I don't have anybody to baptize me, but I know that you are my witness, God, you and the angels of heaven, because I'm a sinner. And I know that you all rejoice over one sinner who repents." And I said, "God, I'm just going to put myself back and up in this bathtub." I did it in a bathtub. And I said, "I'm not doing it. You're doing it. Your Spirit's leading me to do it." And I baptized myself basically, but I knew God was my witness. I'm not encouraging that, guys. I'm just telling you that was me as a babe in Christ. That's what I did because my faith was like that of a child. And I really want that again. I want God to see me that I'm seeking him like a child. That's how we're supposed to be. When a kid is sick or they're hurt, do they hesitate usually to come to you? No, they'll say, "I don't feel good," or "I don't this." A child is honest and open before the Lord. So I told her, I said, "I've not been baptized, but this is what I did." And she was like, "You can't do that. You have to do this, this, this. Book of Acts says ABC." And that's why John was a Baptist. And I was like, "No, they called him John the Baptist because he baptized people. He wasn't a Baptist." Guys have this man made religion, you all. You got to throw it out. It's ridiculous. She just kept questioning me. "Where did you go to school at?" I told her what university I'd went to. I told her the degrees I had. And it was like she wanted to. And then when I started to tell her that I had degrees and that I'd had a good job prior to where I was at that point, then she was like, "Okay." But it wasn't until she got into what she thought was prosperous. She thinks that degrees and a title and where you work, that was what she was trying to draw out of me. And that's what I saw when I read the book of Job. I felt like some of these people that were around him were just there because of his accomplishments. Guys, you can't do that to people. Paul said it doesn't matter whether a rich person, was it Paul that said, or was it Jesus when he was talking and said, yeah, Jesus talking about favoritism. I think this was around the time when he was talking about the sermon, when he did the Sermon on the Mount. Doesn't matter if a rich person comes into a meeting or a poor person. If you show favoritism to that rich man and say, "Here, sit at the best seat of the house," and you tell the poor man, "Sit at my feet," treat him like a dog, basically, you're wrong. You can't do that. It's not about accolades and accomplishments. It's not about what you have. It's about your spirit. It's about your heart. It's about who is in you. And he is greater than he that is in the world, Jesus. And in my notes, I just put today's time, people, men and women both, are scared to death to show weakness. People equate weakness like, "Oh, you're a wuss." How many times you heard somebody say that? "You're a wuss, man. Toughen up. Get some, skin. What's wrong with you? Get some tougher skin." They think that's inadequacy. But 50% of the population in America, and I looked this up, over 50% of people think that if you struggle with a mental issue or some sort of physical defect, that you are, quote, weak, and that weak is bad. Jesus did not say that. People might have looked at him as weak at times. He wasn't. So Let me tell you this. Job was saying, I wish I was never born. I wish there were never breasts to nurse me. I wish that the day of my birth was wiped off the map. Today, people would say, you're suicidal. If you went to the doctor today and you quoted in common terms, like not in old English, but in the way we speak today, if you went to a doctor and you said, Doctor, I wish I was never born. I wish the day of my birth never happened. What would they do? They'd be saying, okay, let's get you to a psychiatrist. You're exhibiting signs of, suicidal tendencies. Let's put you on, let's do Wellbutrin. Let's do Lexapro. Let's do Prozac. Let's do, and they'll give you a list. You know how I know? They did that to me. But Job was not saying these things because he was wanting a response or wanting someone to pity. He was telling the truth. And that's what Psalm 15 says when David said, who can live with you, Lord? Who can dwell on your holy mountain? He said, those who speak the truth from their heart. Job was seriously so just distraught, guys, at the time that this all happened, that he meant every single word, and God did not charge him with sin. He was not sinning by telling the truth. But today's society, if you come to somebody, they don't want to touch you. Now, I used to work in a jail. Years ago, I was a detention officer. And the second an inmate started speaking to us that way, we had to get them into a SEG unit or get them to the nurses' ward, like a ward, like the medical ward. And we would have to put them on a hold, and we would have to watch and monitor. They'd take everything from them out of this cell so they couldn't hang themselves or hurt themselves. I probably shouldn't have said that. I'll get struck. But anyway, they'd put you on a 5150. They would, if you're out on the street and you say that, they're going to detain you. They're going to think you're crazy, but that's not. It's not crazy to say that you are mourning or you're in anguish. That's what Job said. He said if they had scales to measure his misery, it couldn't be measured. He was so miserable at that point. That is not weakness. It's the truth. And people today can't handle the truth. They don't know how to handle the truth. Admitting weakness is almost like telling somebody you have it. I mean, they think it's a disease. And they're going to try to give you medication. They don't want to talk to you. They don't want to find the root cause. They want to put a Band-Aid over it. And that's what these meds are, guys. I was recently offered a med when I started to tell my struggles to someone that I knew I can't trust. And the person, it was a doctor, offered me Prozac. I'm just going to tell the truth. And I started to read what Prozac does, and see, years ago, I was on that kind of medicine, and it messes with your mind. And I started to read stories on Reddit of people who take those type of meds, and it makes them worse. Like, I get anxious sometimes and nervous, and that's what it was given to me for. And I read that it actually increases the anxiety. Now, look, I'm not knocking anybody who takes these meds. If you take them and you are functional and they help you, do I believe that God could use that to help you for a brief time? Absolutely, I can. I believe. I'm not a person who says, oh, you can't take any medicine, you can't go to a doctor. I don't believe that. There are still a few doctors out there that are genuinely trying to help their patients. I'm not saying that there aren't. There are. And I'm not saying that the doctor that gave me that was trying to be, dismissive. I'm just saying in his mind, he thought he was helping me. Job goes on and listen to what he says in Job 6, verse 25. I love this. Look what he says. He says, I must have wrote the wrong. Hold on, guys. Oh, there it is. How painful are honest words. Honest words are painful. And so, Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar, his friends, are sitting there like, what is he saying? Like, why is he saying? They were almost offended that he was telling the truth. And then he goes on and says, why do you treat my desperate words as wind? You ever heard somebody say, oh, they're just blowing wind, or they're blowing smoke? They're just talking. Job said, you're treating my words as wind. You're dismissing them away. And that's what they were doing. They were trying to be like, Like I said, have you ever been really distraught and had somebody say, well, they that wait upon the Lord, and smile and they walk off? Guys, that's not helpful. Is it great that they know scripture? Is it great that they're saying things like that? Yes. That can be encouraging at times. But sometimes, like Pastor Dave said when I was telling that story a moment ago, you don't want to hear that. You want someone who's been through a trial, who's been through the fire, who wants to help you and listen to you. His friends were being of no benefit. They were dismissing his words as wind. You know, it's sad. It's really sad the state of this world, how it is. He goes on in chapter 7 and says, I won't keep silent. He said, I will not keep silent, because not Bildad, but what was his name? His first friend, Eliphaz. He was like, just chill, calm down. Everything's going to be fine, basically, in our terms. And he said, I won't. I'll speak out in the anguish of my spirit. This is what Job said. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Some people think that God doesn't want to hear your complaints. I've heard people say you can't complain. God doesn't want you to complain. That's not what he said. If you have a genuine complaint and you are confessing it to God or a friend that you think you can trust, he wants to hear it. Job said, I won't be silent. I'm going to complain in the bitterness of my soul. He was going through it, y'all. I don't know of anybody that's lost that much in one day like Job lost. He goes on in chapter 7, verse 15, and says, so that I prefer strangling and death rather than this body of mine. And again, like I said, if you go out to your doctor or a friend and say, I'd rather somebody strangle me, I'd rather be dead, they're going to put you on a psych hold. I guarantee you. They're going to be like, oh, you can't talk like that. Why not? Why? Just because you say something doesn't mean you're going to kill yourself. That's not really what the goal was. He was trying to express what he felt in his soul. And he said that his friends were treating his words as wind. Like I said, how many times people said, oh, Terry, you're blowing smoke. No, I'm telling you the truth. And like he said, how painful are true words. He goes on in verse 16, I despise my life. I would not live forever. He said, I don't want to. I hate my life. Jesus says that if we love our lives more than him, we're not worthy to be his disciple. If you love father or mother or children more than me, now, does that mean he wants you to hate your family? No. But he wants the love that you have for him to well in comparison to what you have for others. He wants that to be totally two different things. He said, let me alone. My days have no meaning. This is Job still talking here. He addresses the Lord. He even tells him, Lord, leave me alone. He's not tiptoeing around the Lord and saying, Lord, well, I'm sorry that I feel this way. He told God, he said, leave me alone. He said, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to. Just please stay away from me, Lord. I can't match you. You're too great. You're too awesome. I can't fight you. Can you leave me alone? He was speaking the truth from his heart, just like Psalm 15 says we should do. That's why Job was considered blameless. I'm going to show you that it's not about your behavior that makes you blameless. What did they say? That Abraham's faith was credited to him as righteousness. It didn't say Abraham never lied. It didn't say Abraham never did anything wrong. Because if you remember back, Abraham lied about who Sarah was to him, not once, but twice. To a king, and he almost took her in with him and slept with her, but he didn't because he got a dream from the Lord. And then he stopped, and then he said, you almost, got me in big trouble with the man upstairs because you lied to me. You told me Sarah was your sister. It didn't say Abraham's ability to be perfect was credited. It said Abraham's faith was credited to him. Job's ability to be honest and to not charge God with anything, but to just tell how he felt. He was blameless. Do you guys know at the beginning of that book, It said his children were constantly feasting. Like I imagine people today, just like coming out of these holiday seasons, people are having banquets and doing all these things, eating and drinking and merriment. Job said during their feasting, they would have feasting for weeks at a time, that he would go and sacrifice just in anticipation, just to see, just in case they had sinned against God. What a righteous man. What a thorough man. Today, people will call you paranoid when you do stuff like that. Sometimes I'll tell my family that aren't saved, I'll say something like, I did this or I think this. And they're like, man, you're too much. You're overkill. You're paranoid. No, I just do things in anticipation of something happening. Job was sacrificing in anticipation that his children may have sinned because they were feasting, they were drinking. I'm reading my notes here. So Bildad comes in. His friend Bildad speaks after Eliphaz, and he basically blames Job. That's in chapter 8. You start to see, you can go over and read what he read if you want. He said, God did this to your children because they deserved it. Okay, well, that may or may not have been true, but Job was sacrificing to God for his children on behalf of them. And then he says, Job needed to seek God earnestly. He said, you need to seek God earnestly, like he already wasn't. Job was said by God himself to be a blameless man. And like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean he's never made a mistake, guys. That's not what blameless is. People think that blameless means perfection on all levels. No. If that was the case, Abraham would not have been called God's friend. He then goes on and tells Job in that chapter 8, if you're pure and upright, then he's going to restore your prosperity. He literally says, surely God doesn't reject one who is blameless or strengthen the hands of evildoers. He will fill your mouth with laughter, and your lips will be with shouts of joy. Your enemies will be clothed in shame, and the tents of the wicked will be no more. So here again is the people, like I said, that you deal with sometimes when you're going through something. Bildad's like, look, your prosperity, if you do A, B, C, D, and you're perfect and you're blameless, like you say, then God's going to restore it. You're going to be happy again. All he's thinking about is materialism, prosperity, and merriment. But why is Jesus Christ, the man we're told, which is not a man, he's God, the one who we're told to follow, why was he acquainted with grief and sorrow? We're supposed to imitate Christ, guys. And I assure you that Jesus wasn't out here like these televangelists are, living his best life, cruising on jets. If they had jets back then, he would not have been on one. People lie. People make their assumptions about God because they don't seek him. He even said, Job said, who seeks the Lord? And he's like, who seeks the Lord? They all assumed that Job had done something wrong because he was suffering. Guys, suffering and that doesn't go together. Just because you're suffering does not mean you've done something wrong. That's not always the case. God puts things on people he knows he can trust. He told the devil, he said, Job is blameless. He's not going to fall for your schemes. And he didn't. He goes on, Job does, in chapter 9. I was reading my notes. I'm sorry, y'all. Job's talking in chapter 9 about, he tells Bildad, he said, I know that some of what you said, this is true. So like I said, do you know how people will sometimes throw a half truth in there? Going back to that pastor I was telling you all about earlier, he said, it's the You may hear some preacher preach and maybe 99.9% correct, but it's that 0.01% that'll get you, because people love to throw in half truths with a bunch of lies. They love to do that. And Job is just talking about God's mightiness and how he put the constellations in place. He talks about the Pleiades and Orion and all the things that God's done and created, and that he is so beyond our comprehension. He's trying to let these men know that your comprehension of God is not correct. It's earthly, and he is beyond that. God is beyond what you are thinking. And I heard some scholars say that they thought Job had lived in the time of Abraham and the patriarchs. Guys, obviously these scholars don't read their Bibles anymore. That's what my daughter said earlier. Man, they don't read their Bibles. If you look at Job 9, if you ever were wondering when Job lived, because I've heard so many people and I've seen in Bibles saying they don't know. Well, I can give you a rough estimate. Job in chapter 9, verse 13 says, God does not restrain his anger. Even the cohorts of Rahab cowered at his feet. He mentions Rahab and her cohorts. You know what a cohort is? That's people that, like, deal with you or that how would he have lived in the time of Abraham if he's talking about Rahab? Because that's way later. I looked at the time frame of Abraham, and they think it was about 2090, somewhere around there. I could be wrong, but Job would have lived somewhere in the time frame of like 1400 to BC. We're talking BC. To around maybe 1200. I mean, I know that's quite a range. That's 100 or 200 years or so, but he was well before Abraham, because Rahab was believed to have lived in the fall of Jericho and the spies. That was around 1406 BC. I know this is just a side note for you guys for facts purposes. But he talks about Rahab in his, monologue here. That would have been 700 years. Abraham was 700 years before that. So he didn't live at the time of Abraham. He says, even though he's innocent, he tells his friends, you may mock me, but even though I'm innocent, I can't argue with God. Now, that's something that you don't need to do. Don't argue with God. Don't sit and say, well, why did you do that, God? Or why is this happening, God? Can you ask sometimes why without being, facetious? Of course. But he said, all you can do, the best thing you can do, Job says in around verse 20, chapter 9, is plead with your judge for mercy. And God is our judge. Jesus, the Lord, is our judge. Plead with him for mercy. If you're going through something, just say, Lord, have mercy on me. Don't try to argue. Don't try to put blame on him or anybody. Don't even blame yourself. Paul said that he doesn't examine or even put, things on himself. Leave it to God. Leave that to God. I read this and told my daughter, I said, this reminds me of me. And Job chapter 9, verse 20, he says, even if I were innocent, because he's saying that he's blameless, but he's not trying to play games like he's an innocent person. Who is? There's no one righteous, guys. No, not one. He said, my mouth would condemn me. And I started dying laughing when I read that. And he said, if I were blameless, it would pronounce me guilty. I told my daughter, same here. Job seems to like to talk a lot. I see that. And yeah, I'm the same way. So he goes on and says he doesn't have a concern for his life. Then I read this and I was like, this is America right now. Like what I was just talking about, how the state of this world. In verse 24, chapter 9 of Job, he says, when an area, a country, falls into the hands of the wicked, he blindfolds its judges, talking about God. If it is not he, then who is it? He told him, he said, when a land becomes wicked, he appoints judges who are blindfolded. Then I started to think about The justice system, I've talked about this several times on my videos, just how skewed this system is. And I'm going to tell you something that I saw today that just made me angry. And I hate to say it, righteously angry, not like, you know, but I was starting to remember laws, because I took criminal law in school. Um, I'm sure that whatever state you guys live in, that you can't have anything like on your back windshield, like covered, like cardboard, plastic, something that's covering your view, or rear views. You have to have the rear view mirrors in the state that I live, and then the back window free of obstruction. Basically, there's multiple different types of obstruction laws, and they vary state to state. But that is it's usually a or a non-moving violation, an infraction. But if it actually causes like an accident, or it is skewing the driver's vision to the point that it's unsafe, it could become a misdemeanor. I know in Texas, I think the obstruction laws are, some are misdemeanors, and they have like $1,000 fines for that. But I was seeing a YouTuber today that me and my daughter used to enjoy watching, because he was a clean, you know what I mean, what we consider clean. He doesn't really cuss or anything, but then he started to take the Lord's name in vain. So we haven't really watched him like we usually do, and we were going to see if he was doing any better. We've been praying for him. He started out from humble beginnings, and now he's very wealthy. And I told her today, I said, I can't continue to watch this person. He had the police in the area that he lived like escort him to drive around in a car that had the whole back window obstructed. It had cardboard on it. It was a challenge that he was doing, a stupid challenge for YouTube. And I told my daughter, I said, this is why I don't respect him anymore. Because why is it okay for him to take the police away from what they're doing because they serve the public? When you are in that type of office, you work for the public, and they're here escorting him on motorcycles and then on vehicles behind and before, and he's allowed to get on a roadway where there's other cars, and his whole back windshield was blocked out with cardboard. Why is that okay? If I were, and I told her, I said, if you and I were to do that, we would be cited and possibly given a summons for court. Why is it okay that people, like I said, let rich people or people who are perceived as prosperous to do things like that, but then when a regular average Joe does it, they're in trouble. This world and the judges of this country especially, I can't speak for other countries, but from what I read, it's just as bad. They don't see clearly. There is no justice in the justice system today. Job said that then. He said, when a land is wicked, everybody's vision is skewed, especially those in judge positions and positions of authority. And we see that all across America right now. People are just in a very sad state. Let's go on. Where was that? That was 9:24. Chapter 10, he's talking about loathing his life. And he says, therefore I will give free rein to my complaint and speak out of the bitterness of my soul. I say to God, don't declare me guilty, but tell me what charges you have against me. Does it please you to oppress me, or to spurn the work of your hands while you smile on the plans of the wicked? Job wasn't pulling any punches here, guys. He totally just told God how he felt. But yet God said he didn't sin. He called him blameless. So why is it people say, you can't tell God that? You can't say that to God. Look what Job said. It was true. God doesn't want you to lie. Do you think that when you're, lately I'll try to like praise, or I'll pray and I'll say something that's generic because it's not how I'm really feeling. And I thought, well, I have to do that because we've been taught as a society that you try to act like you're okay when you're not. You're supposed to pretend to be okay in front of professionals or whatever, wherever you are, whatever the circumstances, that you're supposed to act okay or feel okay. Job didn't do that. He didn't care. He even said to God, I'm going to give free rein, or I'm going to let my complaint have its control. I'm going to tell you why I'm complaining. And I do that, and people take me very wrong sometimes because of that. But I can't change who God's made me. You shouldn't either. Let's see. I'm going on to read because I had a couple other points, and I'm going to have to cut this. This has been way too long. For all those, I was going to do, actually, I did a video about, I'm not going to say that word because they'll ban me or strike me. Pregnancy terminations. I'm going to say it that way. I did a whole 2-hour video about my issue that I had with that, what I did, like my testimony, and they took it down. I've tried it twice now, and I think one time the video just would like spin, it wouldn't play, and the next time it was totally like removed, and they had a little informational thing at the bottom, medical thing at the bottom. So, but for anybody who doubts God and who doubts who makes you in the womb, in verse 8 of chapter 10, Job says, "Your hands shaped me and made me. Will you now turn and destroy me? Remember," he's talking to God, "that you molded me like clay. Will you now turn me to dust again? Did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese? Did you not clothe me with skin and flesh and knit me together with bones and sinews, tendons? You gave me life and showed me kindness, and in your providence watched over my spirit." So, who makes you? Who molds you? Who chooses you? Anytime somebody says you're a mistake, you're not. Even if you were conceived in sin, David said he was as well. We're all born into sin, whether we're born into a right relationship or a wrong one. Whether you were planned or unplanned by your parents, you were planned by God. You were molded and shaped by God Himself. Don't ever let anyone tell you any different. If God didn't want you to be here, you wouldn't be here. If God didn't want you to have a child, He chooses. He opens wombs and He closes the womb. Because people had told my daughter, well, I guess you're a mistake. No, you're not a mistake. I was born into a relationship. My mother wasn't married. I'm not a mistake. I was told I was, but I'm not. I'm here for a reason. Don't ever let anybody tell you different. So his friend Zophar in chapter 11 comes into the conversation. And so here's what he basically says. I'm going to sum it up. He's like, how dare you talk to God that way, Job? That's basically what he says. He doesn't even believe that Job is blameless. He's kind of like testing the waters. And when I read what this guy said years ago, like I said, when I read this, I was like, oh, well, he's speaking some truth. But then I caught like how people are today. Like it's kind of like, I'm trying to see how to describe it best. So he called Job's talk idle. He said, it's idle talk. And how many times will you be talking to somebody and pouring out your soul to them and they're like, yeah, yeah. They're not listening. I tried to have friends, but it didn't work. I told my daughter, unfortunately, sometimes you're better off without friends. Because I think now in today, like I said, today's society, it's commonplace just to say, how are you? Do you really want to know how they are? Or are you just asking out of courtesy? It's a courtesy. And then if someone says, well, I lost my dog, I lost my job, I lost my house, I lost my car, they're like, stay away. They don't want any part of it. Sorry, guys. Verse 6, chapter 11, verse 6. Zophar says, oh, how I wish that God would speak, that He would open His lips against you. Wow, some friend, huh? He said that he wished that God would say something against Job. He said, and disclose to you the secrets of wisdom. Like Job wasn't wise. But yet earlier, I had read this to Allie and tell him what you thought his writings sounded like. Who?
Solomon's.
And my daughter, we've been reading Ecclesiastes and talking about Solomon and how actually sad Solomon was, because he said with much wisdom comes much grief, with much knowledge, much sorrow. And when I was reading chapter 10 of Job to Allie, my daughter, this morning, she said his writing sounds so similar to Solomon. It does. Job was a very wise man. God had bestowed a great wisdom upon him. Yet Zophar challenges that and says, true wisdom has two sides, he said. There's two sides. Basically saying that there's God's side, Job, and there's yours, and yours is wrong. And then he says this, know this, God has even forgotten some of your sin. Now watch what he does here. It's slick, guys. You got to be slick to catch this. Verse 7, chapter 11 of Job, he says this. Excuse me. Can you fathom the mysteries of God? Can you probe the limits of the Almighty? They are higher than the heavens above. What can you do? They are deeper than the depths below. What can you know? Now, he's doing something really slick here. He's almost like a cop that's going to arrest you for something that you didn't do. And they'll say like, look, I know you're not a bad person, but you probably made a bad decision today. Or everybody makes mistakes. So he's saying, look, God's probably forgot about it, but just admit it, like a cop who's saying, come on, you did it and you didn't. You're like, no, I didn't. They're like, yeah, it's okay, buddy. I don't think you're a bad person. I just think that you made a bad decision today. Everybody makes mistakes. God's forgot about it. I'm willing to forget about it, but just admit it. He was trying to, in a roundabout way, get Job to admit his mistake. There was none. There was nothing to admit. Hold on, guys. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I've been using this. I think I told y'all in another video for years. It's like a over-the-counter nasal spray. I have a broken nose. They fixed it when I had brain surgery, and then I broke it again twice. So yeah, I have to use that to literally breathe. It's very bad for you. I don't advise it. So yeah, here he's trying to get Job to like, come on, Job, you did something. It's okay. God's probably already forgot about it. Just admit it. And then verse 7 and 8, which I already read. Sorry, I read that. And see, he's 100% true about when he's talking about God. He goes on and talks about how the measure of what God does is longer than the earth. It's wider than the sea. He's talking about if you come along and if he convenes a court, can you oppose him? I mean, the things that he is saying are true in essence, but they're not true to this situation. So that's why you can't use generic, like I said, things to say to a person when they're really going through something. You can't make the mistake of judging someone based on their circumstances. Just because this person lost their job, lost their house, lost their car, lost their family, whatever, that doesn't mean that they're guilty. You can't put a man or a woman on trial for suffering, but this world does that. They automatically assume that you are the person who has done something wrong. And I can't stand that. I can't stand to see people who are genuine and honest and who are just going through something that they didn't cause, and they're accused of some type of unrighteous, activity or something toward. It's not right. You shouldn't do that. God says, Jesus says in Matthew, if you judge or when you judge, see people say God says not to judge. That's not what he said. He said, when you judge, judge correctly. Judge correctly. And people can't when their vision is skewed. People can't judge when they have a film over their eyes, when they're seeing through rose-colored glasses, so to speak. They don't have the wisdom of the Lord. They don't have the Holy Spirit to show them the discernment. There is no discernment anymore, guys. People don't have discernment. It's gone. It's very few. If you want to ask for a gift, ask for obviously love, faith, hope, discernment. Don't ask for all these gifts that everybody else is asking for like signs. Everybody wants to see people speaking in tongues and interpreting tongues. And 90% of the places I see people speaking in tongues, they have no interpreter. It's just chaos. The church today is chaos. Apparently, people were like that then too, in Job's day. So, and in verse 7 and 8, like I said, within a truth that Zophar, Job's supposed friend, within a truth, he conceals an accusation. So he's like, God is this and that. Can you oppose him? You should tell him the truth. Like, he's trying to sneak those things in. He says, do you know how God works? Can you oppose God? He thinks he knows better than Job. He's saying nobody can oppose God, but yet he thinks he understands God. Zophar does, and he doesn't. He doesn't understand God. Bildad doesn't, obviously, and neither does Eliphaz. None of them there, but Job get it. They don't get it. They definitely don't get him. I have family members that do that. They don't know anything about God, yet when I'm the first one to make a mistake, they're going to be like, does God want to see you do that, Tara? Are you sure? It's people are shady. We all are. And without the Lord, you can't function, guys. I'm telling you, you cannot function without Jesus. You'll function in this world, but it's not going to end well for you. I assure you. In verse 11, listen to what Zophar, this is his supposed friend. He says, surely God recognizes deceivers. And when he sees evil, does he not take note? So that would be basically like him saying, you're a deceiver, Job. He's insinuating that Job is a deceiver and that he has done some type of evil. He thinks he's slick by doing that, but he's not. Job's not having it. Neither will God. It says on the day of judgment, you will be asked to answer for every idle word that you spoke. So be careful what you say. Was that rain? Sorry, guys, I heard something out my window that sounded like rain. Is that what that is?
I don't know if it's raining.
It says cloudy. Anyway, it's just, that's how it is. That's how people are. And then he even calls him a name. Get this. In verse 12, he says, but the witless, Witless, can no more become wise than a wild donkey's colt can be born tame. He's comparing him to a donkey who can't be tamed, a witless man. Witless means, foolish, stupid. You can't think clearly. You're somebody who's not very rational if you're witless. So basically, he was not coming right out and saying, Job, you are witless, but he is insinuating it once again. And then in verse 13, he thinks he's going to start telling Job, well, this is how you fix it. What you've done, you've lost everything, but look, you still have hope a little bit. It's got hope mixed in with his sly, comments. But listen to what he says to Job. Yet, or but, if you devote your heart to him, if you put away the sin that is in your hand and allow no evil to dwell in your tent, then, free of fault, which means you can't make a mistake, you will lift up your face. You will stand firm and without fear. You will surely forget your trouble, recalling it only as water that's gone by. Life will be brighter than noonday. And see, here comes this positivity crap. And darkness will come like morning. You will be secure because there is hope. Secure. You'll be secure in your possessions, secure in your positivity. You ever been around people that are like, I don't want any negativity. I'm only about positivity. Positive vibes, guys. Positive vibes. This is a kind way. This guy right here so far was telling Job, look, if you just seek the Lord, admit your fault, you've been witless, but if you do this and you never make a mistake, he doesn't say blameless. He says, if you become free of fault, that means never, ever make a mistake. Never. Then God will bless you. Then you will have prosperity. Then you will have brightness and it'll be all sunshine and rainbows. It doesn't work that way. Job hadn't done anything wrong to begin with. Most people are not free of fault. Like I said, Abraham was called righteous, yet it wasn't because he was free of fault, because he lied a lot and it was documented. And yet he was a friend of God and called righteous because of his faith. But this guy is, again, doing what people do today. He's like a televangelist. This guy right here would have been very successful on Daystar or TBN. Painting this picture of, if you do all these things, then God will bless you. If you do everything that you're supposed to do, so to speak, then God's going to give you the desires of your heart. No, it doesn't work that way. God is not a genie. He's not someone that you come to and say, I want this, so give me this. Or I did this. Today I did this, so you owe me. That's what he's telling Job, because Job was already seeking God. Job was more righteous than any of these men, yet they're all blaming him. They're all trying to find a flaw in him and telling him if he will do everything that they think he's supposed to do, that then God will respond with blessings that he can't imagine. All about this materialism. Guys, those things fade. I can't say this enough. I saw a commercial or a little ad on YouTube. I call them commercials. I'm old school. Sorry, I don't watch TV anymore. So when I see an ad on YouTube, I think of it as a commercial. And there was this woman, and she's looking, I think, at a desk, like in a little cubicle, and she's like working a mundane, everyday job, and she's really down. And she sees herself in this mirror, and it's like this person in the mirror looks at her and starts talking about this university that she needs to go to. And they're trying to play into this mindset that, this job you have is not good enough. You need a better one. So you got to go to this college and have a degree and make more money to make your children happier. Then it shows a picture of her kids and it says, do it for them. Guys, this is mind control. People today think that the program called MK Ultra was like done for. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that. A lot of celebrities back in my day were subjected to this. They say like Britney Spears and a lot of these people were put under a form of mind control that was created by the CIA. And they use it in advertising all the time. They try to bait you and they try to make you believe something, like they alter your form of reality. And they make you think that having that degree is going to make you more successful. It's going to make you more prominent. They're still using all these types of mind control devices in advertising to this day. And I'm telling you that having a degree from a university is not going to make you any happier. I have two. It's not made me any happier. I'm not happier. I don't even use those degrees. I don't even use them. But I'm in debt because of them. I'm telling y'all, don't fall for the ploys and the plots of this world. They want you to be sucked in, and they want you to be one of the sheeple. They want you to follow the world. They want you to get away from Jesus, and they want you to go their way. Their way is not right. I saw a picture about a week or so ago it was during the time of Hitler in Germany. I'm sure you guys probably have seen this. This is a very popular picture. I don't know if it's real or if it could be fake, but they were all doing the Heil Hitler symbol, in Germany during the war, And there was this one man out of probably 500 people in this photo who was like this. He wasn't doing it. He wasn't bowing down to the Hitlerites, He wasn't doing it. You have to be like that man in a society where everybody's going left, you go right. Don't be like the world. That's what this Zophar is telling, Job. Just do this and you'll be fine. Be fine. All be sunshine, rainbows. And like I said, was Jesus all about sunshine and rainbows? Did Isaiah describe him as a happy-go-lucky, effortless guy who got what he wanted? Jesus was a king. Jesus is Lord. And did he live in a mansion? Did he drive a fancy car, have a fancy horse? Sorry, there were no cars back then. But did he have all those things? What did he say? Foxes have holes and foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. We all need to be more like Christ. in a world where everybody wants to be more like these celebrities, or everybody wants to be more like the politicians, or more like the so quote unquote educated people. There's a man that I'm sure you all have heard of. His name is Jordan Peterson. I still to this day don't exactly know what he is. Like, I don't know. People look at him like he's some like wise man, like his wisdom is supposedly oozing from him. I heard him speak the other day. I listened to a question they asked him about God. It was about the Lord. And the convoluted answer that he gave was so hard to follow. And I was like, why do people where do people get that these people are so wise and educated? And education today is a ruse. A lot of these colleges are it's a money racket. They leave you in debt, and then you still don't have a job that, lines up with what you went to school for, that's where I'm at. I went to school for criminal justice and police science, corrections, sociology. I had a minor in theater. I don't do any of that. And all those years of college and school and money and effort and all that were wasted. Am I downing school? No. If you go to college and you have a job that you really are passionate about, that you feel the Lord has led you to, go for it. But I'm starting to realize that in this world, in the economy that we're in America, there's not many jobs that you're going to find that are for the Lord. I don't know of many at all. Even these ministries, I've looked into some, even like nonprofit ministries, and they're still just so shady. I don't even know if I would want to be a part of it. Guys, I've lingered too long. I just really hope that this has helped someone. I'm going to start on chapter 12 tomorrow, probably tomorrow or the next day, because I'm rereading back through myself and just asking the Lord to show me what he wants me to say. But I want to get this out right now off my chest. If any one of you needs to talk to me, I don't know if I'm going to open my comments back up. I think I'm going to get a new email. I've had 2 or 3 emails that have been hacked, and I can't get back in my old email. This brand new one I just started like 4 months ago, I think. So I'm going to try to get a new email, open the comments, and I'll put it in the description. If somebody really needs to talk to me that doesn't know the Lord, that needs help, I will talk to you and lead you to scriptures or lead you to the right direction. I will do my best. I know that there are people who don't know Jesus and who are confused and who think that because of what they've done, that God won't have them or have them back. Maybe you're a backslider. I'm telling you that he will. Jesus never leaves you. It says he'll never leave you. He won't forsake you. He'll follow you to the ends of the earth. He'll hold you in his hands. He won't let you go. Read the parable of the help me, what is it? Prodigal. I was going to have to ask her. The prodigal son. I'm a prodigal daughter, so I do understand. I pray that all you all are doing well. Like I said, I'm going to try hopefully tomorrow to have an email to give you guys, an email that works in case someone needs to reach out to me. I just pray that everyone's well. I'm going to just bow my head and pray right now. Lord, thank you for the person that's watched this video and those who haven't. That's my cat. I'm sorry. I pray that you all will just really seek Jesus and know that the only way out of the situation of this world is through him. It's through Christ. He is the only way, the only hope, the only life. And I ask that you just protect all these people, Lord, and show them who you are and reveal yourself to them. And I ask that in your mighty name, Jesus. Amen. Guys, I hope you have a good evening, a good night, and I'll see you again soon, hopefully in another video. Take care.